Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. I'm your host, David Russell. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly.com, where you learn the habits of highly successful people. I was talking with somebody just this morning, and they're still struggling with time management habits. And there's a way through that. We have got a great course on Habitly.com that can help you through that, even an episode that's short, 5 minutes. So why not get some best practices that way? Habitly.com, first 7 days free. You can't go wrong. Today's podcast is with David Latta, L-A-T-T-A. He wrote the book, The Synchronicity of Love. I don't know whether I pronounced that correctly, but it's 119 stories of what he's learned over the last 20 years. Here's a guy who was terrified and stalked by the fear of death. His business was on the verge of bankruptcy. His wife walked out on him, had 2 kids. And where do you go from there? Well, join the podcast and hear what he has to say. It's a great story. John, welcome to the show. I was intrigued by your story, and I'm not going to say anything about it right now, but please let the audience know a little bit about your background, and then let's dive into where you've been and where you are today.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate the invitation. So my story really begins about 20 years ago when everything that could have gone wrong all went wrong at the same time in my life. My wife got cancer, came completely out of left field, and seemed like in the blink of an eye, they had removed her thyroid gland and had to take a pill for the rest of her life just to live. And that was very shocking. She was young, really good shape, came out of left field. And she proceeded to change like crazy, started reading books like The Meaning of Life and God, books that I didn't read at that stage of my life. And then around that same time, I had left my very secure job as being the store manager in a regional grocery chain. I'd managed a number of stores and left to start my own company. And I had started a chemical company, and we were making branded chemical cleaning products and pet products sold in retail stores all across the U.S. And I managed to lose all of our money in a short period of time. 1 minute I had about $1 million. The next minute I was $650,000 in debt.
Oh boy.
$250,000 in personal credit card debt, borrowed against the house, SBA loan. I borrowed. And I was trying to get, a little lift off with my company. And I moved a little too fast. And I learned a lot about cash flow in my early days too.
Yeah. The school of hard knocks.
Yeah. So the company took off, which was great, but we were spending $2 for every dollar that was coming in. And by the time I realized that, it was a little too late. And so literally we're facing bankruptcy. My wife has gone off in a whole different direction. And then in the middle of it all, I was chased by this unbelievable fear of death. And I had not considered myself a religious person or a spiritual person in any way, shape, or form. I don't know where this fear came from. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know who to talk to about it. I wouldn't have talked to anybody about it. So behind closed doors, I was running like this scared little boy, just terrified of death. So facing bankruptcy, in the middle of it all, my wife walks out, says, "You take the kids, you're the better parent, see you later, goodbye," and goes off on a whole new life. So I'm a single dad with 2 kids, aged 9 and 11, facing bankruptcy, terrified of death. And I don't see any way I'm going to be able to dig out of this hole. And that's where my journey began. And so,
wow. So, I'm trying to think of the different data points there.
Yeah.
So you got this massive mountain of debt.
Right.
And did you have any payroll debt or any debt you could not write off in a bankruptcy?
Well, I never got to the point where I actually started down the path of bankruptcy. I started exploring it, but I don't know the answer to that question. So
okay, well, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So, all right, well, then you just gave us light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So what happened next? Because, and also, actually, I want to stay there a moment. You had all this pressure.
Yeah.
How did you get up in the morning? And how did you get yourself focused on something that was truly most important versus something that just was stressing you out?
Well, the first thing I did was lose 15 pounds, which was unusual for me since I was skinny and athletic anyway. So I learned that anxiety can burn a lot of weight off. So, actually, one of the first things I had to learn to deal with was anxiety. And I was kind of an anxious, energetic, go kind of person anyway. And so, but this was too much even for me. And so, I'd started a therapy for the first time in my life, never done that before. Got a book on fears, anxiety, and phobia, and started following all the instructions in it. And it was little things like that I do still to this day that's been really helpful is I don't go to bed at night until I have my entire day and week planned out before I even go to sleep. I know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I've got the plan in place. I know what I want to accomplish tomorrow, next week, next month. And so I don't stew on it in the middle of the night. And so I do that even to this day. My wife kids me about it all the time. I don't go to bed without making the plan for tomorrow. I just sleep better. And so that was probably the main thing is I had to teach myself how to sleep again because I was only getting maybe 4 hours a night and it just wasn't enough for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like by doing even a minimal plan for the following day, you were then that helps you let go.
That's exactly
right. Am I hearing you right? You could just kind of let go, put it on the shelf, whatever you want to say. But then it was like, okay, I don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah.
And
tonight,
what do you do?
Sleep.
What do you do? Okay, you make the plan, and there's still like an hour before you go to bed, and then you think of something else. Do you go back to the plan, or do you just email yourself what the additional thought was?
One or the other, but the idea is, it'll be there waiting for me in the morning. I'm aware of it now. But right now, my priority is sleep, not worry.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. Yeah. If I'm much better when I get the sleep, and I'm 65 now. So if I can get 7 or 8 hours, it's wonderful. If you cut me back to 6 or 5.5, I can do it for a day or two, but then I start feeling the stress. Yeah. It's just whether I've got additional stress at work or not. So yeah. Okay. So that enabled you to sleep and then what about when you had all these pressures? How did you choose what was most important and how did you kind of divide your time?
Well, so 2 things happened as a result of all that. Number one, like I said, I started a counseling process, which I'd never done before. 2, I went to my first ever spiritual retreat, which I was so anti-spiritual was like a major leap for me. And so, and both of them helped me, gave me a little bit of a lifeline, I guess, like, okay, I can get through this. I wasn't sure I wasn't going to go bankrupt. I wasn't sure my business was going to go under. There was nothing wrong with my business. I just wasn't making any money at it. The sales were growing. The products were doing well. Everything was great. And, but, I jumped into something that I thought I knew about, but, sometimes we jump in and we don't know nearly as much as we think we do. And so we're fighting an uphill battle because there's so much to learn. I like to say there's, you don't know what you don't know. And so, the priority was take care of my kids. Priority was to take care of my business. And I had to deal with that fear of death later. So those were the priorities, trying to keep my kids' life, normal, coaching their ball teams, keeping a normal routine, and just doing the best I could at work every day. Man, I learned a lot about surrender. It's like, I think my mantra to even today is do your best and then let go. Do your best.
Yeah. Serenity prayer. Yeah. But what I'm also hearing you say, Johnny, is how to take care of the kids, which I think is awesome that you didn't let them get lost in the mix. And then I had to take care of the business, but without saying it, you also started to realize you had to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of our listeners, I think, are missing some pieces there. They might be missing it with the kids or the family too, but usually focus on the business is easy for them. But so the therapy piece, and I want to say to the listeners, if you haven't done therapy yet, then you're probably going to do therapy. My hope is you get somebody who's good, because there are a lot of people who give therapy who need to be in therapy, is my opinion. But if you get somebody that's good, it makes a world of difference. And then why don't you talk about the spiritual aspect? We may totally disagree on the direction you took, but I do believe spirit is part of us. So I don't know what you want to share there, but you say that made a significant difference. What was kind of the path you chose?
Well, everything makes sense always looking backwards. When you're in it, nothing makes sense. And it sounds really strange, but what I went through for maybe the next decade after everything fell apart and then I started counseling, I, as this guy who identifies as a male and a man and kind of led a very aggressive, competitive, type A, alpha male kind of life, I didn't know it, but I had completely obliterated what I would call my feminine side. And so the next 10 years was about claiming something I didn't even know I was missing. And so it's simpler than that sounds. I became more empathetic and compassionate. I became a better listener, which is actually a good skill in management. I've been in management since I was 18 years old. I've been bossing people around my entire life. And so I didn't realize I wasn't that good a listener. I started in therapy and the therapist said, "You're too smart for me. I'm going to put you into group." And then the group turned out to be all women and 2 women therapists. And I just felt like a fish out of water in that group. And I had to learn to do a lot of things I didn't know how to do. I didn't know how to ask for help. Like I said, listening became huge. There's a chapter in my book where the women were getting on me all the time about, "John, you need to learn to try being instead of doing." And I had no idea what that even meant. And so I'm tucking my son in at nighttime, waiting for him to stop talking so I can turn off the light because I'm very much, on task, staying on top of things. And I thought, well, now these women are telling me to be. Maybe I'll just sit here and just listen to my son, not try and get him to be quiet. And 30 seconds into it, I was overwhelmed by this feeling of love that I'd never felt in my entire life. Nothing like that. And I was like, suddenly, I just loved all of his excited babbling instead of wanting to turn it off. And so, things like using intuition rather than just logic to solve problems, a whole other world opened up to me. And that was a part of the whole spiritual journey for me as well. And the teacher that I worked with said, "You're not going to lose your highly developed masculine side, but ultimately you'll be more whole and more resourceful. It's not like you have to trade one for the other." And so that was, after all these years, and I've had my book is full of a wild bunch of crazy spiritual experiences, lots of that borderline miraculous. But where am I today? I'm just more whole. I'm more resourceful. I'm more balanced. And I didn't realize how out of balance I was.
Yeah. Well, and I certainly agree with you in the soft skills that you developed, the empathy piece and the slowing down, that type of thing. I don't know about the categorizing them kind of male and female, although males have more tendencies in one direction, females in the other. But I love the way you were able to get some mentoring, and that opens you up to those pieces. And I'm sure it affected you in many ways, not just, with your child when you're putting them to bed, but, in how you interacted with other people and that type of thing. So that, I think that's wonderful. So you were stuck, and then you had to get out. And one of the big things, I want to bring it back up because I think it's important for the audience, was this whole thing of the way you kind of let go each day so you could enjoy the evening or sleep, depending on when you do it, was this planning. And I remember a story years ago, I do not remember who told it, but there was a young man and he was invited by his boss to join him at a dinner at his home, at the boss's home. And he noticed as they walked up the walkway to the front door in those days, and his boss was carrying a briefcase. Remember those days? And his boss reached up and he touched the limb of a tree and then went in and they had dinner. And for whatever reason, he was spending the night there. Maybe he was visiting from out of town. And the next morning when they left, he noticed his boss reached up and touched the tree branch again. And he said, "By the way, I'm just curious, why do you touch the tree limb when you walk in and out?" And the boss said something similar to what you learned. He said, "When I touch the tree limb, I place all the stuff that happened at work. I just throw it up there and then I don't think about it. And when I come out of the house in the morning, I take it back down. And that's when I touch it."
I love that. Yeah.
I don't know who told it, but I've always remembered it as such a good little metaphor,
Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in planning. I was a store manager in a regional grocery chain for a lot of years, and anybody that works in retail, you got about 100 employees, and the employees aren't always most reliable at the retail level. A lot of them are minimum wage, and a lot of people with alcohol, drug addictions problems. So you get used to just everyday shit happens every single day. We had my typical store, we'd have 3,000 customers a day, and some of them would be kind of cranky. And like I said, sometimes employees didn't show up for work, and sometimes deliveries were late. And so it almost seemed kind of crazy to have a structure and a plan, because you're always kind of rolling with things too. But I figured out early on there were two kinds of managers. I call them the planners, that was me, and there were the firefighters. And the firefighters had to put a lot more hours in the day than the planners did. Or it's actually different. A little bit of planning, you don't have to work as hard. And other people, they were just like, why plan anything? In this business, you just got to roll with what's coming at you. But I love the planning. I love the structure, and I sleep better at night.
Well, I think it goes back to the Chinese general Sun Tzu, but a lot of several American generals and other military people have said you always have a battle plan, but the battle never goes according to plan.
Yep, that's it. It doesn't happen in the chemical business either. So yeah, it's just, geez, I felt so blessed that I sold my company right before COVID hit, because the new owners they've been in business for 65 years. And with all the supply chain issues, talk about things not going to plan. They said the last couple of years were the toughest years in their 65 years of being in business.
Wow. Nice timing. Nice timing.
Yeah.
So how did you get out of that hole in the business, John? That sounds like a battle every day.
Yeah. So two things happened. One, you brought up a good point. Hadn't thought about it. I started to take care of myself because I had to. It was almost like survival. Like I said, I weighed 158 pounds normally, and I was the skinny guy who ran and did triathlons and stuff. Then I got down to between 140 and 145, which is a little skinny for a guy who's 5'11". And so I was like, I had to take care of my sleep. The therapy and the spiritual retreat I worked with had given me a little bit of a lifeline. I don't know why or how. It just gave me a lifeline. And it's kind of weird. Everything just stopped at work. Things stopped getting worse. They didn't get better. And every day I was robbing Peter to pay Paul to stay afloat and keep all my creditors happy. And I want to say nothing significant happened over about a 2-year period. But I spent a lot of time poring over books and numbers. And I figured out, my cost of goods sold can be improved. I found a manufacturer that could make my same product for a lower price and at a better quality. It was going to be a royal pain to make the transition. And it was painful and it was more expensive, but I could see light at the end of the tunnel. If I get this done, I'm not going to hemorrhage cash anymore. I'm going to start making money. And so I stomached that transition too, which is just terrible timing. And so I want to say I stopped hemorrhaging cash, and it kind of just flatlined for a couple of years. And then miraculously, things started to get better. I got our products into Target. I got our products into Walmart. They gave us some stores, then they gave us more stores, and they gave us more stores. And so maybe 4 years after hitting rock bottom, I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. So, it's just, you get up, you deal with the problems in front of you, and you find a way to correct them. And then you find some more problems and you find a way to correct them. And so I'm really lucky and blessed that I didn't declare bankruptcy and walk away from the business and go back to my old job. So I hung there, like I said, by a thread, skin of my teeth for about 2 years. And then things slowly and then quickly started to turn the other direction.
So it's really easy to say 2 years, but let me do a call out to the audience. 2 years is 730 days or 731 days, and depending on what 2 years they are. It is an incredibly long time. And oftentimes, a problem for some people, like myself, has been, I should have quit and I didn't. And I didn't run with the right people, didn't have the right knowledge, whatever, to figure out what I was doing wrong. So that's where I've made my mistake. How did you know it was the right thing for you to continue to pursue this? Although at the time you're hemorrhaging cash, there are so many things that are pointing to, hey, John, you need to stop.
Well, the main thing was I could see a scenario where this is all going to come together. And I must have created spreadsheets every single day saying, if I get this cost of goods sold down and I get my products into Target and Walmart, this could really take off. This could be really huge. And so I did have that little carrot dangling in front of me, and it didn't seem pie in the sky. It didn't seem like it was that difficult. I mean, it was. That's the one blessed thing about being an entrepreneur. Sometimes you don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I think most of the time.
Yeah. But so I didn't know that it was going to be tougher than it was, but I knew it was possible. And so if I didn't see any way out, I didn't see any possibility it was going to change, that would have been different. But I knew it was possible. And it wasn't just pie in the sky. This is doable. I just need to get my cost of goods sold down. And I need to get into some higher volume retailers.
And so when you were setting your plan for each day, was there something in that plan that was like, I don't know if you've seen the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. Was there something where you said, okay, tomorrow, here's the one thing that's most important I got to get done to kind of keep the company afloat or give me the opportunity to get to where I can cut the cost of goods?
Well, again, I think, I think the most important thing for a CEO, an entrepreneur, any founder running a company is just vision. Who are we? Where are we going? What's the vision? And so that vision was the thing that kept me going. So, and then behind that vision was the 1,000 little details that had to be attended to. And so I would put together a plan before I went to sleep at night, and sometimes get up in the morning. And of course, maybe what comes across email is I'm going to have to change the plan a little bit now. But it was always focused on what do I need to do to get the numbers to all pan out. And so I wasn't an accountant or a CFO by background, but I had a good grasp of numbers and accounting. And so on paper, I was like, I know I can get this to where what it's showing me right now. It might take a while, but I know I can get there. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, David.
Well, so I'm going to go out a slightly different way. So what you're saying is helpful, but I want to kind of get granular, and it may be like, no, it didn't happen. But, there's the strategy side of what you're trying to do, and then there's the tactical side.
Right.
And so what I'm wondering is, did you believe in strategy and then just do the tasks that you had to do each day? Or was one of those tasks each day, or maybe more, but was one of those tasks linked to reaching that objective, or those two objectives, lowering the cost of goods sold or getting into a major retailer? So each day it wasn't just fighting fires.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know if I do this, I'm taking a step in the right direction. I'm not just treading water.
So, it's hard for me to answer your question. They're both being done side by side. So two things had to happen. I had to get that cost of goods sold in line, all my expenses in line. I had to be as lean and mean as possible because I couldn't afford to hemorrhage any cash anymore. Number two, it meant, so I had a sales team of about 18 salesmen. And in my business, the way it had evolved over time is each sales team specializes in a particular retailer. 30, 40 years ago, there was a whole bunch of small retailers. Nowadays, there's really 10. And they're giant, and they're like little kingdoms unto themselves. And they expect you to know how their kingdom works. They're not going to teach you. So my Home Depot kingdom, my Walmart kingdom, my Target kingdom. So I had a team devoted to each one. And the number one thing I needed to do was get that product into more high volume retailers, because that's frankly where the money is. And a small business like mine, so I was what they call a virtual corporation. Even though I was a chemical company doing millions of dollars, it's amazing how much nowadays you can outsource. And so I didn't have a lot of employees. So by doubling my business, assuming the cost of goods sold was in line, the bottom line could increase tenfold. So a doubling of sales could be literally a tenfold increase in bottom line. unfortunately, the reverse was true too. A big drop in income could be just devastating to the bottom line. And so I had to get the expenses in line. I also had to achieve a certain amount of growth to get to that point where the company was extraordinarily profitable.
So you said that when it came when you identified that supplier who could lower your cost of goods
right.
significantly, that it was very painful to make that change.
Yep.
What type of pain did you have to go through, and how long did it last?
The entire process from the beginning of identifying a number of potential new suppliers and testing all the formulations to actually beginning the process of we're now going to send the purchase orders to them and to the old one, weaning ourselves from the old one. It's so unbelievably complex. I mean, little things like this new manufacturer doesn't use the kind of bottles that we have on their assembly lines. So do I want to switch to a new bottle? They have a different way of applying labels. They use a different labeling company. They use different cardboard. They print the labels on the boxes differently. And so because the goal is to get this product delivered to Walmart, Target, or whoever, and not them know in the slightest that there's been a manufacturing change. It has to be seamless and smooth. And, to tell them that the boxes are coming now in a different size or the bottles are in a different shape, now they're an inch taller, but they don't fit on the shelves anymore. It's infinitely complex. And thank God I didn't have, like 500 different products, So the whole thing probably start to finish, probably about a year. And then even then some little hiccups along the way. Yeah. And, the old manufacturer is never happy about losing the business. And there's some things that they want cleaned up before you walk away from them completely. So start to finish, probably a year.
Wow. And as you went through all of this, how did you really make certain you had the time with your kids that you felt was important?
It sounds like it's difficult, but since a lot of my phone calls and business was on the East Coast, I had custody of my kids. I'd leap up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, deal with a lot of email, feed my kids, get them on the school bus, race into work all day. But a lot of my business was winding down, you might say, in terms of because a lot of business nowadays ultimately is just communication, phone and email. It was winding down by 3:00. So you might say I kind of worked on almost like an East Coast schedule. You almost call it like 6 a.m. to 3 or 6 a.m. to 4. And then, sometimes I had things to attend to in the evening, but I would try to wait till my kids had gone to bed or, maybe watching TV or something like that. But mainly I got my rear end out of bed early in the morning.
Well, and it sounds like one of the reasons you were able to get your rear end out of bed in the morning was because you went to bed at a consistent time in the evening. Yeah. Without the stress.
Yeah. And I would say most days my goal was to be asleep by 10 and up by 5:30 or 6.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So thinking of all that you've been through, and I don't know how you found time to meet your current wife and date her and do that with all that you had going on, but that's probably a different podcast for a different audience. But what advice would you have? What closing advice? Now, you also wrote a book. Why don't you talk about the book a little bit and then give us some closing advice for the audience on, if you had to think of the major life lesson you've learned or the top 3, what would those be?
Well, the book I wrote is called The Synchronicity of Love, Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. And it's really it's told in kind of an unusual fashion. There's 119 short, true stories going back for the last 20 years of my life, beginning when everything went all to hell all at once. And what I want people to know is a couple of things. Well, a few things we talked about. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. A lot of things don't make sense unless you have some time under your belt and you can look back with retrospect. 3, anybody that's an entrepreneur in management, any kind of management position, CEO, you can always learn more and grow more. And a big part of my journey was moving into being, it almost sounds cliche, more whole. And, I follow, still interested in sports. And it's amazing how you can have two NFL coaches, and one of them is just, Pete Carroll, the Seahawks, where I am here locally. Every day he goes to work, it looks like he can't wait to go to work. He's like this happy kid. He's enthused. And he's very much, I think you'd call him a player's coach. And then Bill,
by the way, Pete Carroll. So my brother was in high school with him, same grade. And he said even then he was just a nice guy. But the thing I always liked about Pete Carroll is when you watched him as a professional coach, a lot of times you see him before the game just tossing a football with somebody.
Yeah.
Because he just loves the game.
Yeah. Well, anybody that's in that sort of coaching, management, CEO position, everybody's got their own style. Look at Bill Belichick of the Patriots, and the guy doesn't look like he's ever having a good day. He might get one smile per day out of the entire year out of that guy. Yeah. But they both are very successful. But, I think I want to encourage people that are in management to always move towards making yourself more whole, more resourceful, more skilled. You don't have to do it that way. And if you choose to just kind of stay in your own narrow lane, it's good to surround yourself with a great variety of people that kind of fill in the weaknesses that you have.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So if people want to learn more about what you're doing, John, what website do they go to, and where else should they go to connect with you?
Yeah, the website is johndavidlatta.com, and my last name is Latta, johndavidlatta.com. Again, the book is Synchronicity of Love. And that book is really my exploration of when you allow yourself to not be so one-sided and allow yourself to be more whole. It's amazing some of what I would just call miracles, coincidences. I like the term synchronicity starts to show up in your life. That was definitely my experience. I think the book could have been titled Rigid, Rational Man Becomes Random, Accidental Mystic. And I've had a few people say that's a better title, but but that's been my journey. And I know there's a lot of kind of hard-ass men and women running companies. And I just want to encourage them to explore that other side of yourself, whatever that might be, because there's a lot of really amazing things to be discovered there.
That's great. Love it. Thank you so much, John, for coming on, sharing some of your journey.
Thank you so much, David. Appreciate the invitation.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you like the episode with John, please subscribe, leave us a comment or a rating. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget our sponsor, habitly.com. Isn't there one habit that you have that's a strength that you want to make stronger? Or it's an area that's kind of weak and you want to improve in? Check out habitly.com. It's inexpensive. As a matter of fact, the first 7 days are free. You can't go wrong. And stay tuned. We've got more great guests coming. Bye for now.